Sarah Tassini is a special education teacher in the Syracuse City School District. She is my son's special educator at PSLA at Fowler High School, and one of my favorite people. Pretty much anybody in special education is a favorite people of mine. And Sarah's been very helpful and supportive in the year that Isaiah's been in her classroom. And she readily said yes when I asked about talking with parents and caregivers about, some tips for teaching and learning at home. So Sarah's going to chat with us today. And if you have any questions, you can click on the chat icon and type your questions for Sarah. And I think only you are on the phone, Liza, so we're not going to worry.
And we have Sean here too.
I'm sorry, what, Scott?
Sean's on the phone too.
Okay, yeah. So if you are on the phone, go ahead and speak up when we ask for folks to give their questions. Supporting me today are my colleagues, Liza Citron, who is an autistic adult and advocate, and Scott Davis, who is an adult with disabilities and an advocate and entrepreneur himself. So Sarah, take it away.
Awesome. Hello all. Thank you for this. I actually just got home from cleaning out my classroom. It was very sad. I cried multiple times. It felt so unfinished. And I am a first year teacher, and I have so many, hopes and dreams and a vision for my to get there. And it shut down. So it was very hard to walk in there and see March written on the board. But yes, so teaching distance learning is very, I'm not a fan of it. And unfortunately, it's all that seems that we can do right now. It's not the quality that you'll ever get with one-on-one instruction or group instruction when you have a teacher in front of a group of individuals. But as far as tips for working with students with disabilities at home, I would say it's all about what the kid needs. You think about special education, you have the IEP, which is the individual education plan. So it's about the individual. So what works for one of my students, distance learning, was completely different for what works for another student. I have parents that have basically said, we've kind of opted out of doing work. And I said, it's your choice. I said, honestly, what's most important is your child's mental health right now, because this is a very confusing time. So if you have any specific questions, I'm sorry, I really didn't prepare anything, but if you have any specific questions, are you looking for strategies, or are you guys working with what type of age groups, what type of disability are the students that you're working with at home through distance learning? That might give me a better way to formulate some tips and strategies for you guys. Yeah, that's a great question, because I really think it boils down to the individual too. So you talked about the flexibility. Depending on the type of learner that you have, the flexibility can be great. The creating my own schedule, the self-driven learning, that can be a huge benefit for certain kids that can learn that way. But for a lot of the kids that I have in my classroom, and I know Isaiah too, they depend on that structure and that routine and that consistency. And when you're home too, home and school are also very separate. And a lot of students with disabilities have categorical thinking. So all of a sudden, for some kids to shift to home as a school, or to look at it as like that, it's like, no, those are two things that don't belong together. And that can be a hurdle that, that some kids are still getting used to. Like, why am I still not going to school? Why all of a sudden is my teacher or my mom doing the math work that I used to do at school? So I think it depends on the type of learner, but I think this gives us a time also to be creative. We obviously never saw this coming, and like I said, I feel unfinished. It just shut down, and it's like, but it gives us time to think outside the box and be creative. And I love hands-on activities. And so I'm not a fan of like the computer learning, and I feel awful like sending assignments or doing stuff that require the parent to be the sort of special ed teacher, because that's not necessarily what they've had training in. And so like I can consult with anyone, and I'm happy to, but I can also understand that from the child's perspective, like all of a sudden, why is mom or dad or grandma or my older sibling, whoever, taking on this role in my life in my house? And I said, for kids that can't separate those two things, that can be tricky. And I have a couple of students like that, and that's why the parents are like, I've kind of just opted out of doing work. And I said, you have it. I said, if you want to do it, I said, don't push them. If it's going to push them over the edge, I said, it's not the end of the world. I said, they're not going to substantially regress. I said, they made great progress this year. And I think that when we do get back, they'll be able to pick essentially up right back where they left off.
Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Because just to give you a quick background on myself, I've been in both environments. I was for the first 6 or 7 years at the Henry Viscardi School in Albertson, New York, and that was 100% disability. Then I was mainstreamed into the Fairfield Public Schools without really any knowledge of how to take the test, how to ask a question, etc. I was thrown in. I didn't have aids except like if I went to get some help from my reading or whatever, or just with the teacher to kind of how do I modify my behavior, which I was fairly successful with, but still I had struggles all throughout my education. But I liked structure too, because when I was in an open classroom, there wasn't structure, so I didn't really feel I was guided, but also you need the challenge too. So it's kind of challenging.
I would agree with that. One of the things that I have central in my room, and Samantha has seen it, I have a big visual schedule. So when the students come in, they know exactly what the day is going to look like. And there's even times, and it will say, morning work, breakfast, morning meeting, then we're going to do ELA, then we'll take a walk outside, then we'll come back, do science, math before lunch, have some free time, go to APE, come back, do closing circle, and then go wait outside for the buses. So that is very important, because I struggles with anxiety, and it's always about that unknown. You're anxious about what you don't know, what it's not going to look like, and everyone's kind of for the first time in that boat, because we don't know when things are opening, we don't know when we're going to get back to quote unquote normal. So I think now people are really starting to empathize, especially with a lot of students with autism who depend on predictability and structure and routine, because for the first time everyone's kind of like, wow, is this what it feels like for them every day? And it can be. But also in the same sense, it's also really important to, when things like this happen, to try and hone in on those life lessons that sometimes we just don't know the answers. And I remember, like, I have one teacher friend of mine, and her and I agree on a lot of stuff, but this is where we disagreed. On days that there were 2-hour delays because of the snow, she would go in early and change every kid's individual schedule. So when they came in at 9 o'clock, they didn't see it set up. And I disagreed with her. I said, Al, I know that you want to protect them from that feeling of disappointment or seeing their schedule being changed in front of them. But I said, a 2-hour delay is a real thing. Sometimes the weather interferes with real life, and we have to set them up to know that. That's really important, because sometimes parties get canceled. Sometimes people get sick. Sometimes we can't go to the store because it's closed for whatever reason. And I said, I know that they depend on that structure and routine, but they also have to know that sometimes it's a part of life. And this, we could never have prepared anyone for this. I'm not even prepared for what we're going through right now. So yeah, I empathize with you, Scott, because yeah, structure and routine is very important. And it's when things like this happen, we're kind of left like, now what? Absolutely. I know what you're saying. How can we involve the student in creating their individualized plan? What works for them? That's a great question, because sometimes when I create the invitations for these committee on special ed meetings, there's like 14 people that come and speak. And sometimes and I've had outside agency workers or an occupational therapist or somebody, and everyone has their own preference or like desire for this student. Well, I think he should have a 1-to-1 aid. I think he shouldn't because he needs to be more independent, blah, blah, blah. You lose track of what the student would advocate for themselves or can advocate for themselves. I always, when creating a plan, talk to the parents, but also really look at the students' strengths and skills. So many of our students have so many skills and abilities, and a lot of especially most of my autistic students, their ability to follow a schedule as well as a desire to follow a schedule is like their biggest strength. So just building that in to daily routine, and even smaller daily routines, like sitting down for just a half hour of work, giving them the options of, do you want to do this first or this first? Okay, like we're going to write down a checklist, and then that you created that, so you're going to follow that now. And it's that accountability piece too. You have that, I created this, I took part in this. You have that pride piece, so you're going to more likely follow through on that. Yes, I read IEPs and I met the student, and I'm like, did they even meet the kid at all? So yeah, it's really important to know your kids, and like I said, just know that their strengths and stuff, and just create the plan based around that, because there's always room for improvement and growth. But the way you're going to get there, like I said, they're all individuals, and they all have things that they don't like and quirks and things that, we know this. So it has to really be individual. You can't cut and paste other paragraphs from another IEP and, implement it for this student. You got to go through, and it can be hard work writing that IEP, but at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, like, that's what I was so looking forward to. Like I said, I was a first-year teacher. Sorry, I'm on a huge tangent right now. I was a first-year teacher, so I met all these students, but I got their IEPs that were already written for them. So this year, I had the pleasure of writing at their annual review their own IEP, creating goals that, fit their strengths and abilities, that they can achieve them. So I think the biggest piece is knowing the kid, but also that giving them that choice and helping them develop little pieces throughout their day and their schedule, I think is huge, because talking about the future and like the IEP can be kind of overwhelming. It's kind of far away, it's kind of abstract, but if you talk about in the IEP, like giving them smaller like choices and helping them create daily tasks and routines that they're going to follow, that's big.
I would definitely agree about the 30-minute, I call the victory aspect. Also, when I have, for the past about 4 or 5 years after I was downsized, I went through the Bureau of Rehab and the County Center, both agencies, thinking I would be helped. But a lot of times midway through a year, one of the partners then changed over to another partner. So there wasn't really that consistency. I don't know if you find it where you work with special ed, if the same people are always there.
That is something I advocated for, and I'm not speaking badly about the high school I work at. I love it, but it was all new administration over the summer. And I went in the first 2 days before school hoping to, introduce myself and, say I've worked with students with autism for 3 years and I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. Like, I live and breathe behavior and all this stuff. And I didn't know who my TAs were for the first 2 days. And I didn't even get my final list of TAs until the first day of school as students were walking in off the bus. So I was never able to hold a team meeting, go over IEPs. And again, an IEP talks about the child. There's nothing like meeting the child and observing the child and working with the child, but it is important to read it and sign off that you've read it so you get some background information. I wasn't able to do any of those things, and so we don't know necessarily what the fall is going to look like yet, but I've built a relationship with my principal, and he says, knock on my door if you need anything. And if I do not have the same staff that I had last year, it's going to be a problem, because they've developed these relationships, this rapport. Yeah. They see the kid, and that it takes, not everyone's cut out for this type of work. And you either have it or you don't. You can sense when a kid's about to go off. You can sense when they don't like something, even if they can't verbalize that. You see the look on their face. They're happy, they're upset, they're not themselves. So consistency within staff is huge, because it's also that trusting relationship. If you don't have someone that you can work with that you trust, you're not going to get quality work. And I've seen that. I've seen other students in BOCES when I used to work that they just didn't have a good relationship. The TA didn't have a good relationship with this one student. And when it was their time to work with them, the student would be horribly behaving. And I was like, they know that you don't respect them. You know that they know that you don't really care to work with them. They are very, very smart and observant, more than we are. So they sense everything. So you need to respect them. They need to know that they have your attention and that you care about them. And I think that's a misconception in high school when they assign TAs, because I had 7 TAs in my room this year. When they assign teaching assistants, they think, oh, they're 17 years old. This is how they should be acting and walking and toileting and eating and drinking. And I'm like, okay, remember, these are students with disabilities. They're individuals. They're all staggered. They could be here developmentally when it comes to this area, but also much higher here or much lower here. And that's okay. You can't judge someone based off their age. So it really is about getting to know the student, and there's nothing like that. That's something that is authentic, and it takes time. And that's really what the month of September is about for me, is building that classroom community, taking walks, doing fun art projects, just getting to know each other. Because, like I said, our students sometimes struggle with communication. So knowing what they need when they can't even formulate a sentence or write it down themselves, and then asking them about it to help problem solve is huge.
Also, one of the concerns is, what are they going to do, like, outside of, 2 concerns. What are they going to do outside of when they do age out of the system? And also, how are they going to handle this? Because back when you come in, you might not be able to distance or be as close.
Yes. So, aging out, I actually have a student who turns 21 in June, right? An IEP that basically goes in a cum folder along with any hours that he's worked. So he worked at a thrifty shopper job site this past year before we closed down every day. He did great. And it basically talks about his skills. Again, so it's finding him employment that is based on his skills. So the student, when given checklists or creating checklists, he thrives on it. He has that sense of pride in creating and then doing the work that he's set down to do. He would be really good in something that's scripted. He struggles a little bit with less structured activities or environments. That's when he starts to ask a lot of questions, because that's his way of coping with anxiety, is to just keep asking questions, even if he knows the answer to it. Like, say we're waiting for a bus and it's not here right yet, and it's supposed to be here at 1 and it's like 1:02. That's when he'll start to ask questions over and over again, because he's trying to manage that anxiety because it's unfamiliar. So creating that exit summary, as well as, like I said, all of his scores for his alternative assessment, his speech summary, his occupational therapy summary, as well as transitional assessments that I've given him. So it's things that he likes to do versus things that he doesn't like to do. And there's so many types of transitional assessments. And that's another thing, that's not a one size fits all. There's kids that present better with like reading different scenarios and saying which one's more like me. The ones I gave him are working inside versus working outside. He had to check what he'd rather do. Would he rather walk to work or drive to work? Would he rather paint or some stuff like that? So it basically sums up his interests and things that he doesn't like to do. And then there's also the parents fill out a checklist of like independent skills and things that they need help with, like on a scale of 1 to 5, you know, does he do this all the time, sometimes, or never? As well as checklists that I fill out too. He has a case manager through, I want to say it's Life Plan, that I've been in contact with. So when he turns 21, and I'm not sure what supported employment looks like right now because everything's kind of closed down, but that is his goal. And he's absolutely an outstanding candidate for it. So hopefully as things start to reopen up, they can get out and explore with businesses that hire adults with disabilities for supported employment. Because if he just had like a mentor, he'd be fantastic.
I could identify about when you're not sure and you're anxious, you ask questions. That was exactly like me at work a lot of times, or even with school.
I'm the same way. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, or that adult, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you have like an understanding. You say, oh, this student is 17 years old. You already start building in your mind what they would look like or walk like or talk like or stuff like that. And for me, I think the biggest thing is, at least this is my opinion, because I've worked with many teaching assistants, because before I was a special teacher, I was a teaching assistant for 4 years, is a lack of just training and a lack of knowledge around disabilities like autism. And what are the learning characteristics? What are, like you said, just asking, like when someone asks questions, it's not because they're being annoying or they're being defiant or they're trying to have a behavior, they're trying to cope with their anxiety. For me, I think within the school district, the biggest issue is there's just a lack of training on the learning characteristics and the characteristics of individuals with autism, as well as how to work with them. And that's another thing. You can't approach a student and just read a paragraph to them and assume that they can answer the questions. Everyone has a different learning style. Everyone has different learning strengths. Some students process information through visual over auditory. Some students need both. Some students need just auditory because it's too overstimulating. So I really just think it's lack of training and knowledge, as well as experience. A lot of my teachers that I had this teaching since I had this year had never been in a room where there were mostly students with autism. They had been in high school classrooms where the primary disability was like in reading. So I think they were thinking that they were going to be coming in with 17-year-olds who, had autism, and they might had in their mind what that looked like. But I love the quote, and it's so true. If you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism, because there are characteristics and things that sensory components and things like that, but it's going to be different for every individual. So just it's the individual instead of assuming. And while as I really just think training is the big thing. I hope that answered your question.
Whoa, that's a tough field to be in.
One of the things that you mentioned at the outset that I love is being aware of mental health of students. In one of our next sessions, we're going to be talking with mental health professionals. But for you as a teacher, how do you handle that? The students' mental health needs, and how would you suggest for parents at home with their kids, having all sorts of stuff going on? How would you suggest that parents, first of all, look for it, and then what do we do about it?
Okay, absolutely. So the first thing, how I handle it in school, when I have a hunch that something isn't right, or the student has come in off the bus a little off, maybe, one of my favorite questions, and my mentor teacher last year said, I love that you asked this, I always ask the student, what do you need? Because no one can answer that best. I don't want to assume for you that you're feeling a certain type of way, and because last time you were feeling that way, I'm going to do this for you right now because it worked last time. And sometimes, even when you ask that question, a lot of the times they'll be able to give you an answer, but there are times that they can't, and that's when you have to sit and problem solve with them. Give them options. Do you want to take a walk? Do you want to take a break? You're already started. Do you want to finish it and come back later? Do you want to help me do this? I actually have to go to the office and, pick something up. Do you want to come with me? Oh, I know that you really like working with this teacher. It looks like she's free right now. Do you want to go work with her? Just finding what they want and need at that moment is huge. So, and mental health is very tricky because we also know that a lot of our kids, because they have so much going on, that sometimes the mental health aspect likely gets overlooked. Something also that I'm a huge advocate of is movement and exercise, especially for our kids. We know that there's huge benefits to that. And there's benefits to anyone, disability or not, of walking or just getting your body moving and getting the blood flowing throughout your body. So I often built movement in throughout our day. We always took walks outside, and if we couldn't do that, we did like dancing activities up on the smart board, where it was like Dance Revolution, and we had to try and follow the movements on the YouTube, and they loved that. And I have one girl, Miranda, who she pushed out to a lot of classes, and she has a very high vocabulary. She would often say, "Oh, Miss Tassini, I really don't feel like going for a walk, or I don't feel like going to gym today." And I was like, "You always tell me that, but I know that you come back and tell me how much better you feel after." And she did. So she'd go and she'd do the activities and phys ed, and she'd come back and she would be in such a great mood. We also have a school-based health center at Fowler that does everything from dentistry to counseling. And I actually have a couple of kids that's like, it's free to families. As far as gen ed goes, I'm going to go there because I'm such a huge mental health advocate. I think that mental health needs to be like a class taught. And if this isn't eye-opening to the world right now, what we're going through, that mental health needs to be talked about more and destigmatized, and therapy needs to be normalized, as well as medication. I think back to the health class that I took in high school, and we talked about sexual health, and we talked about puberty and everything. Mental health needs to be just as a big unit. So I really think that. And at home it's hard because it's like, I'm sure that most of you have great relationships with your family members, but it can be hard to talk about things with family members. And I see a therapist myself, and I have a great relationship with her. So the transition from in-session therapy to FaceTime was like absolutely nothing for us. And I actually used to FaceTime her when I was in college. But yeah, I'm a huge advocate of therapy and even medication. And I had friends too that say like, oh, like I just want to ask my doctor for, a prescription for this, a low dose anxiety medicine. And I said, no, I said, you need to go to therapy as well. I said, medication does work. Medication has benefits. There is stuff with serotonin and dopamine and neurotransmitters that is physiologically happening with anxiety and depression. I said, but until you learn to cope with whatever is manifesting and bothering you, medication is only going to do so much. And I said, think about when you want to lose weight. I said, you diet and exercise. You don't just do one or the other. And they're going to tell you, any nutritionist or doctor will tell you that if you want to lose weight and maintain it, you have to do both. It's the same thing with your mental health. If you're going to take medication, you should go to therapy. Or therapy may not work for everybody, but then do something like yoga or mindfulness training. Practice being in the present. And then again, that exercise piece goes in there. It's just, it's huge. And there's so many studies that show the benefits of it on mental health. And that is something too, that with everything shut down right now, can be built into a daily routine. At 1:00, I do my walk, or at 2:00, I do my yoga on TV, to give you that sense of stability and that holding yourself accountable. And then you feel so good after you accomplish it for the day. That's a great question. So for those students, often have them pick the music or pick the dances that we're going to do that day. I have one student who's in a wheelchair, and she can get up and stand, but with the help of like 3 adults, so that's not every day. But I often had her create like the playlist ahead of time. I would give her notice like 30 minutes before, and her teaching assistant, I would say, hey, we're going to do this at 1 o'clock. I need some music input. I said, last time we listened to Beyonce. Who do you want to listen to today that I can type in? Because they're just as much a part of the classroom community as we are. And she loved that. Other students, too, I had individual movement built into their schedule throughout the day. So they would go to our sensory room, which unfortunately did not get to meet my standards this year. It got away from me. And even now, I didn't even go in there today. But there is a trampoline in there. So some kids I'd have go in there before breakfast and get their energy out. And sometimes even if getting off the bus, if a student was a little, on edge, I could tell. I was like, do you need to move? Do you need some movement today? And depending on their answer, yes or no, they would go do that. Other students too that can't necessarily do all like the harder motions, just getting them on their feet to sway and rock as well as cross their midline. So getting their arms to cross, there's huge benefits to that neurologically, as well as just even getting your feet to crisscross. Or sometimes I put tape on the floor and have them, put their toes out on this spot and this spot, alternating feet. Because every student, it is that individual level. Every student has different movement capabilities. So just getting them to participate at their best level was the goal for everyone. Yep, it is. And actually, I have a lot of students that do before reading or writing activities, I would have them do what we call scissors, and it's that getting that crossing motion across the body, because it's that whole mind, whole body approach, like you said, getting both the hemispheres of the brain, because especially with autism, we know that it's neurological, but we don't necessarily know every single aspect of the brain that it affects, but we know that things work best when both hemispheres are working together. And that's just a really simple exercise that an OT therapist, occupational therapist, will tell you that too. A lot of them do those movement activities before a session because it just gets the body ready. Yeah.
Wow.
All right. I guess one of my questions would be for what would you say to parents who are like myself, who are at home and finding ourselves having to do this schooling long term? We're teaching our kids long term, and we love them, but we're not necessarily.
It's not fair. I feel for you, and I have colleagues who have children of their own, and they have to do this distance teaching while distance educating their own children of all different ages. It's not fair, and it's not right. It will never replace in classroom learning. And I honestly wish that, and I don't mean this in any negative way, I just mean it, and that people need a break. I wish that the school year could just end on June 1st. Because we are holding people to impossible standards, and it goes back to that mental health thing. I saw this quote on Facebook, I think, and it was like, it's a pandemic contest. There is no end that we need to be doing all four emailing assignments here, take learning into their own hands and have initiative and sit down and get logged on the computer. You can only sit at a computer for so long without losing your mind. And I got into this field because I love working with people, and we have to get back there. And honestly, I I'm ready to go back. I've been ready to go back. And it needs to be authentic. It can't be with this 6 feet apart. It can't be all this other stuff. It's just, it's not going to work. It's not authentic. It's not what our kids need and deserve. I'm prepared for that, and I'm okay with that. My dad actually was on the phone with a colleague the other day, and he had a 3rd grade daughter who was working on an assignment, he said, for over an hour on the computer, and for whatever reason it didn't save. And she was in tears over it, and that she was going to get a bad grade. And I was like, first of all, no 3rd grader should be spending an hour, like a consistent hour on the computer. That is unreal. She should be outside playing. She should be creative learning. She should be exercising. And I said, it's too much pressure. Everyone's trying to get ahead, and there's this misconception that we have this downtime now, but it's really not downtime. It needs to be time that you rejuvenate, because this is not, it's unfinished, it's unexpected. We woke up one day and everything was shut down. Everything that we knew that was normal was just gone. So to try and hold people to the same standard, the same expectation, is just absolutely ridiculous. And I really feel for your parents. I do. And like my therapist herself, she's got 2 young kids too, and it's too much. And the kids aren't going to fall behind. Read books with them, talk with them, cook with them, do recipes, do crafts, do fun family activities. This is time that, yeah, it's not the best, but it's also time that you're never going to get back with your family too. And if you have the ability to be with your family right now, this is time that you'll probably never have like this together again. So use it to that benefit. Just let them be kids, and don't beat yourself up if you see someone else posting on social media that their kids have done all their lessons or whatever, because it's not perfect, and the expectation is not right.
Yeah, I've had a few conversations with various teachers of the kids, and in the background, the teachers' own kids are being kids.
Exactly. You can't expect them to just turn that off. Yeah.
And you've seen some of the shenanigans at our house when you've been chatting with Isaiah, and it's the foundation to not be realistic. At the beginning of this, the emails were coming fast and furious. I'd get like 40 texts a day.
Wow.
Teachers, and there was a certain amount of pressure and feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I can't, this is more than we can handle. But we settled into a routine eventually, and everybody's going to be at the same point when we finally do go back. And,
no one's going to be super ahead. And I've had parents that they're not going to regress. And honestly, because I'm very upset that summer school is just learning, because like I said, it's not authentic. It's not as genuine as what you'd get in person. And it's almost, in my mind, and I'm not supposed to say this because I'm a teacher, it's almost like busy work, unfortunately. And I don't like busy work, because not that busy work isn't bad. I have most of my students' morning work is busy work, because as soon as they come in off the bus, I like them to have something to attend to. I like them to have a task to do, and it's usually something that they can do independently. So they come in, the first thing they do is they do their morning work, and they've already accomplished something. So if they start to go off, I'm like, look what you already did. We have so much more to do. You did great with this. Let's keep going. But to do that every single day and expect teachers to be on board and log in here and log in there, and it's so much. And honestly, people just need to feel like this weather that we're having right now is beautiful. We've been blessed with. Just enjoy that with your family. And I said, especially in our program, there's no pressure to pass the New York State Regents or any of that baloney, which don't even get me started on testing. But the fact that all that was canceled just shows that it's not even that important. So we have the luxury of meeting kids where they're at. So if we do what our part is right now and take care of each other's mental health and physical health, then we'll be ready to go when we do have the opportunity to meet again.
They really have to take a a test of Regents. It's not going to be like the where they're at in their learning standards. I guess they get a different test than the regular students do, don't they?
Yes, they do, and those were canceled this year. Actually, it was Isaiah's year this year, and I had started with him, and it was it's called NYSA, so it's New York State Alternative Assessment, and there are a series of ELA, math, and science tests. And before, and this is a great thing about this too, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Not every student gets the same test. I actually go on and I answer questions about the student, you know, what is his most independent reading level where he can answer questions accurately. Same with math. How does the student prefer to, does he write, does he type, all those types of questions. So then they generate this test based on this student profile. So it's really great because, yeah, it's not going to be like, oh, you are all alternative assessment, everyone gets the same test, because we know that it's the same thing if you expect a fish to climb a tree, if you're comparing animals or something. Like, no, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Even with all the training, even if you train that fish.
Exactly.
It's not, that's a great observation, Scott. Even with tons of training, a fish
and also, when you're trying, even when which I would love to have had students in my classes to say, hey, this kid, Scott Davis, is coming from New York, who we don't know how this mainstreaming is going to happen. This may happen, but they threw me in, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And they're teenagers or 10 or 11. They're like saying, who's this guy that can't even ask a question right? And then they throw my books on the floor. They toss all kinds of different hazings I got through life. But it got better through the years. But if the students also in that classroom, if it's a mixed mainstream classroom, are kind of at least, or even given, their parents are giving a letter and that this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before that,
the more anxiety or like novelty you can take away from a situation, if you can introduce, you know, you ahead of time. And that's why I'm like in the autism community, I'm a huge fan of social stories, because it's literally a scripted text that just explains what's going to happen, what it's going to look like, how you might feel, that it's okay to feel that way, and this is just how it's going to be. The fact that you were thrown in there is not appropriate at all. That I'm so sorry that happened to you.
I mean, but that's just the nature of it. I don't know how they could have prepared, because everyone comes to class that same day, and that was back in '74 in the Fairfield, Connecticut school system. That was better, because when I took a test to place in Westport, literally, they just put me in a room and said, take the test, and that was very awkward. But at least Fairfield, and even for Jim, Mr. James and I, before class started, we kicked the ball around. We did some basic things, map work, etc. And even my parents had to fight for me even to be on the bowling team. I did score a perfect score once.
Oh, nice.
But awesome. They were all zeros. I had perfect zero. No, not 300. I had all gutter balls. I was a master at the gutter balls, but...
All right, find your victories where they may be.
Yes, I look back on that, but still, I had bad average about 30 or maybe 40 or 50, but still, at least maybe 55 or whatever, but you have to have... I don't know how to do that, because it was confidentiality. I don't know how much they could do it in.
Right. Well, and that's where I think it becomes up to the parents as well as teachers too, to just educate students that everyone's different and it's okay. And you know,
in general, I see.
Yeah, because a lot of times there was like this. The kids at Fowler were very respectful of my kids, but also almost fearful. And I'm like, you can say hi. Like, you don't have to walk like around them, or they're not so fragile that you can't interact with them or say hi to them. But yeah, teaching them to just also interact is huge, because yes, knowing that they're different, accepting that they're different, but also involving yourself with them. Like, I love our classroom because everyone can work on their independent level and there's no pressure. But I love also when they push out, because it's benefits to both sides. Like, it teaches people that everyone's different and how to work with other people, because that's something that you're going to need for your entire life. Like, that's a life skill, working with people that are different from you, that look different from you, that have different opinions from you. Just opportunities for that include huge. And not being afraid to say hi and just interacting with them.
Exactly. One thing that I learned to get back to, Sarah, that you mentioned were the social stories. And social stories are a great tool for that anybody can use. Once you get like the hang of how a social story is supposed to work. And at the very beginning, as we were leading up to the inevitable of schools closing, we got a social story about the global pandemic. I don't remember if it was you that sent that or if it was someone else who sent it to us, but we got a social story. And when Isaiah was getting like climbing the walls and trying to figure out why the heck he wasn't getting on the bus every morning, we were able to read that to him, and he was like,
good.
Like his body language says this sucks,
it's that reminder, that reassurance of especially in those moments when you start to like build up that anxiety because you've lost your normalcy, you're dependent like on your structure and routine, everything that was normal. It's just that it's like a grounding thing. It's like remind that this is what it is, and it's okay to feel this way. It is okay to be sad, it's okay to be angry, but school's still closed.
There's a the ruler about the emotions. I know Doran Wright, a pastor, who uses that with the inner city schools. It's a mood meter, he calls it.
Yes. We actually had those. I just ripped those off our tables today. I have those taped to the table. So oftentimes we let our students point to where they are.
And also, one thing that helped me out when I was entering the 4th grade, that was a long time ago, 74, but my school, Osborne Hill, they had, like, the first week they had Mark Cantor, someone from a Jewish family. He was probably about 14 or 15. Or no, he was maybe 20 or like 22 or something. And he sort of came in, and then I did things with his family, like basketball and stuff, and that it sort of formed it gave a friendship outside of school.
That's great, yeah. I'm so glad that you just said that, yes, because you said you have to figure that out, because it is dependent on the individual person, because yes, not all communication is through spoken language. There are so many ways to communicate, and I think one good thing that we really in 2020, the technology that we have that aren't even, they don't like that. There's sign language and high fives. And yes, it's that teaching. It's people, there's a common misconception, but there's a difference between expressive language and receptive language. Our kids have receptive language. They understand language. They understand spoken word. They understand directions. Their expressive is not the same as what their receptive is, and that's okay. So there's that common misconception, because they're nonverbal, they don't understand what I'm saying. That's completely inaccurate. We know that. It's just other people learning that. And again, it's like I said, like, it's also around that stigma of mental health. It's kind of all falls into the same category for me. It's just these things that were so, like, normalized for so long, even though it's wrong. It was just like a misconception that like grew and became part of like normal culture. But yeah, teaching and educating kids that just because he doesn't say hello back to you, he can still wave to you and he understands what you're saying to you, and he's actually probably brighter than you are.
Yeah, that was an eye-opening realization when I realized just how brilliant my nonverbal kid was. Because, you know, kids who aren't smart don't get themselves into that kind of trouble, that much trouble.
Yep.
It's like that burning curiosity is one of his strengths and one of the things that helps give me gray hair.
Yeah.
Wow.
I hang on. What time is it? Time check.
It is 1:58.
It is 1:58.
So we are about done with our time. Do you want to leave us with any last parting wisdom before we go?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, that thing I saw on Facebook was really eye-opening to me. It's a pandemic, not a productivity contest. Yeah. Figure out what you need. And like I said, it goes back to that question I always ask my students, what do you need? Think about that question for your loved ones as well as yourself. And know that the answer can change from day to day, moment to moment, and trust yourself and take care of yourself with whatever you find out that you need.